A leaked internal report filed by a U.S. naval commander and obtained by 3 separate intelligence publications on May 3, 2026, did not describe a military victory. It described, and this is a direct quote from the document as reported, a threat architecture we do not have a clean answer for, not a manageable situation, not a contained threat, a threat architecture the most powerful navy on Earth does not have a clean answer for. Let that settle. Because while Washington was publicly declaring that Iran was buckling under the blockade that Carr Island's oil terminals were days away from overflowing, Iran was doing something in the Strait of Hormuz that American military planners had not fully anticipated. Not with aircraft carriers, not with ballistic missiles, with something cheaper, harder to neutralize, and far more lasting in its consequences. If you're watching this channel because you want analysis that goes beyond official statements, the kind of strategic reckoning that rarely makes it into mainstream coverage, subscribe now, like this video, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. This is precisely the kind of story that demands honest examination. Now let's get into it. The United States Navy operates 11 aircraft carrier strike groups. Its combined naval firepower exceeds that of the next 13 navies on Earth combined. Its satellite systems can track a single oil tanker across 6,000 meters of open ocean. And yet, here we are. Because what Iran has been constructing in the Strait of Hormuz isn't a military confrontation in any traditional sense. It's a trap, one that gets more dangerous the harder America pushes against it. Iran has activated its full layered mine warfare doctrine for the first time since 1988. American minesweepers are working in conditions they were never designed to handle. 3 carrier strike group commanders have reportedly requested emergency tactical doctrine updates from the Pentagon. Lloyd's of London has classified the entire Persian Gulf as a war risk zone for the first time in 38 years. And shipping insurance premiums have climbed so steeply that several European energy companies are privately telling their governments the economics simply no longer add up. Every single layer of this story matters. Each one is more consequential than the last. Start where this story has to start. The Strait of Hormuz, 34 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. 34 kilometers separating the Persian Gulf from the Gulf of Oman and everything beyond. Through that corridor, according to the International Energy Agency, roughly 20 million barrels of oil moved every single day before this conflict escalated. That's 20% of the entire world's seaborne oil supply flowing through one geographic pinch point. China draws approximately 1/3 of all its imported crude through the strait. Japan depends on it for roughly 85% of its oil imports. South Korea, 80%. India, nearly 1/3 of all its seaborne petroleum. European nations collectively receive 12 to 14% of their liquefied natural gas from Qatar via this single passage. And the strait isn't merely narrow, it's shaped like a bottleneck. The actual navigable shipping channel where supertankers with significant draft can safely move runs only about 3 kilometers wide in each direction. A supertanker carrying 2 million barrels of crude is 450 meters long. You are threading vessels that are nearly half a kilometer in length through a corridor barely 3 kilometers across in both directions simultaneously in waters where Iran has controlled the northern coastline throughout the entire modern era. Iran's Revolutionary Guard naval forces maintain permanent bases at Bandar Abbas, Kesh Island, Abu Musa Island, and the Greater and Lesser Tums. Islands Iran has physically controlled and systematically militarized for over 50 years. Despite UAE territorial claims dating to 1971, they are not watching the strait from afar, they are inside it. For decades, Western naval strategists acknowledged this geometry and still arrived at the same conclusion. Iran could threaten the strait, harass commercial shipping, and raise costs, but sustain a complete closure against a determined American response. The professional consensus was no. That consensus was formed in a world that didn't yet include what Iran spent the last 4 years quietly building. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes against Iranian nuclear and military infrastructure. Iran did not pause to deliberate. Within 72 hours, its forces began executing what military analysts are now describing as the most comprehensive access denial operation ever attempted in the Persian Gulf. The first weapon deployed was not a missile, it was a mine. Reporting by James Defense Weekly, corroborated by intercepted U.S. Fifth Fleet communications, published by three separate intelligence-focused outlets, confirmed that Iranian naval forces began seeding the strait with a combination of mud contact mines, bottom influence mines, and modified versions of the EM-52 rocket-propelled mine. This weapon sits dormant on the seabed. It launches an explosive rocket upward when a passing vessel's acoustic signature matches its programmed target parameters. These are not the sea mines of the Second World War. A minesweeper can't drag a cable through the water and clear them. The EM-52 variant and its Iranian-developed successors are what naval engineers classify as smart mines. They discriminate. A fishing boat passes overhead, nothing happens. A military minesweeper passes, still nothing, because the acoustic and magnetic signature doesn't match the target profile. But a 150,000-ton crude tanker with a deep draft, a specific propeller acoustic signature, and a distinct magnetic anomaly. The mine launches. A retired U.S. Navy mine warfare specialist speaking to the Naval Institute put it in language that was unusually blunt for that publication. "We have not faced a peer-level mine warfare threat in any operational theater since the Korean War. What Iran has deployed in the Strait represents a generational capability advancement that our current minesweeping assets were simply not acquired to counter. Not at this density, not at this sophistication." Read that carefully. This is a specialist using the precise vocabulary of his field to say something specific. The United States Navy's minesweeping capability was not built for what it is currently facing. Understanding how Iran's mine warfare strategy actually operates is what makes its strategic consequences comprehensible. Iran didn't scatter mines randomly. According to analysis from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, corroborated by satellite imagery reviewed by multiple maritime intelligence firms, Iran executed a doctrine called area denial layering. The outer layer, the approaches from the Gulf of Oman, received a lower mine density, primarily moored contact mines in deeper water. Their purpose isn't to sink ships immediately, it's to force them to slow down, request naval escort, and wait. And waiting is economically devastating. Every day a supertanker sits offshore awaiting a cleared passage costs its operator between $150,000 and $250,000 in charter fees, crew costs, and insurance premiums. Those insurance premiums have themselves become a weapon. On April 17, 2026, Lloyd's of London's Joint War Committee designated the entire Persian Gulf a war risk zone, the first such designation since 1988. At the conclusion of the tanker war, the designation immediately triggered war risk search charges on hull insurance for any vessel transiting the Gulf. Those search charges moved from a baseline of roughly 0.1% of vessel value per voyage to between 1.5 and 3.5% within the first weeks of April. For a supertanker valued at $120 million, that's a single voyage insurance cost of up to $4.2 million, on top of charter rates, on top of crew hazard pay supplements that maritime labor unions in Greece, the Philippines, and South Korea began demanding and receiving. Shipping companies are not charities. Every dollar of that cost flows directly into the price per barrel of every barrel that successfully makes it through. Now, look at the inner layer, the actual navigable channel, because this is where the strategic calculation becomes genuinely unsettling. The U.S. Navy's primary minesweeping assets in the Fifth Fleet area of operations are 4 Avenger-class mine countermeasure ships. Each can sweep approximately a 1 NEM-wide corridor at 5 to 8 knots using mechanical and influence sweep systems. The navigable shipping channel through the Strait of Hormuz that must be kept clear for meaningful commercial traffic is roughly 6 kilometers wide and approximately 90 kilometers long through its most operationally critical sections. Do the arithmetic to sweep that corridor thoroughly enough to certify it safe for commercial transit in waters where Iran can recede mines from fast patrol boats operating at night from its own coastline just kilometers away. The U.S. Navy would need assets it does not have forward deployed in sufficient numbers, and Iran knows this. This isn't a miscalculation in Tehran. It is a deliberate calculation that Iranian naval planners have been developing for over a decade since they first acquired and then reverse engineered the EM-52 from Chinese technical specifications in the mid-2000s. The doctrine has a name within Iranian military thinking, the mosquito strategy. The objective isn't winning a direct military confrontation, it's making that confrontation so continuously unpredictably, and asymmetrically costly that the adversary's domestic political support for continuing it erodes faster than its military capability does. And the mines are only the first layer. Iran paired its mining operation with what naval analysts are describing as the most operationally significant unmanned surface vehicle deployment in the history of naval warfare. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy has been developing and deploying unmanned surface vehicles for over 6 years. Some variants reach 60 knots, faster than any U.S. minesweeper, faster than most patrol craft. They are expendable, costing between $40,000 and $200,000 each, depending on variant and payload, and they are operating in the Strait of Hormuz in coordinated swarms. Between March 15th and April 28th, 2026, according to a U.S. Fifth Fleet incident report cited by Reuters and the War Zone, American naval assets in the Strait recorded 73 separate unmanned surface vehicle approach incidents. Aggressive approaches toward U.S. Navy ships or commercial vessels under American escort. 73 incidents in 44 days, more than 1.5 per day without interruption. Each one requires a response. A destroyer repelling an incoming drone swarm expends between $500,000 and $2 million in naval munitions, close-in weapon system rounds, and small boat interdiction resources per incident. Iran's cost to launch the drone $40,000 to $200,000. America's cost to stop it up to $2 million. An associate fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy described the strategic logic to defense news in terms that warrant careful attention. Iran does not need to win a single naval engagement to achieve its strategic objective in the Strait. It needs to make the Strait expensive enough, unpredictable enough, and politically toxic enough that the cost-benefit calculation in Washington shifts. That is an achievable goal. Achievable. That word deserves to sit with you for a moment. There is a deeper layer underneath all of this, more consequential than anything in the tactical picture, and it involves a decision made not in Thrawn, not in Washington, but in Beijing. On April 9th, 2026, a Chinese-flagged research vessel was photographed by commercial satellite imagery operating in the eastern approaches to the Strait of Hormuz. Research vessels conduct oceanographic surveys. They measure water temperature, salinity, current speed, and most significantly for naval purposes, acoustic properties. The acoustic properties of water at different depths determine how sound travels through it, which determines how difficult it is to detect submarines, which determines how effective anti-submarine warfare is in any given stretch of ocean. This vessel was in those waters for 11 days. It was not the first visit. According to records compiled by the maritime tracking platform Marine Traffic and analyzed by the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, Chinese oceanographic vessels have conducted surveys in the eastern Gulf of Oman and Strait of Hormuz approaches on 6 separate occasions since 2021. China does not share that data with the United States Navy. Iran is party to the 25-year cooperation agreement signed with China in 2021, an agreement containing intelligence sharing provisions that have never been fully disclosed publicly. Iran has also operated Russian-supplied Kilo-class submarines since the 1990s. Submarines that become dramatically harder to track and counter when someone has spent years mapping the precise acoustic conditions of the waters they patrol. The U.S. Navy's anti-submarine warfare advantage in the Persian Gulf rests substantially on its acoustic intelligence. Its knowledge of how sound behaves in these specific waters, at these specific depths, at these specific times of year. If that acoustic map has been updated and transmitted to Iranian naval planners through a Chinese intermediary, America's submarine detection capability in the Strait degrades in ways that are invisible until exactly the moment they matter most. A former naval officer and defense policy analyst wrote in a 2023 paper, "Convergence of Chinese maritime intelligence collection with Iranian area denial capabilities in the Persian Gulf represents a force multiplication scenario that has not been adequately gamed in our public threat assessments." Not adequately gamed. This is precisely what that leaked internal naval assessment was describing. A threat architecture they do not have a clean answer for. Not because America lacks firepower, but because the intelligence foundation that American firepower depends on may have been systematically, quietly, and irreversibly compromised. If you watch this far, you already understand why this kind of analysis matters. the kind that goes where official statements don't. That follows the logic where it actually leads, rather than where it's politically convenient to stop. Subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. Share this with people in your network who think seriously about what's unfolding. Like the video so others can find it, and leave your most considered analysis in the comments. What do you think the endgame looks like from here? And what would it actually take for the United States to define a version of success it can sustain? This is the conversation that needs to happen. Until the next update, stay clear, stay honest, and never stop demanding the full.